Photographer? So welcome to the Beaches Watch community meeting. Happy February, happy Valentine's month. We are very excited tonight. As I said earlier, we've got a lot of information to cover. We have our 3 city managers here. We have Kevin Hogencamp, who is right now the interim city manager. We have Pike, who is the Neptune Beach city manager, and we have Mike Staffopoulos, who is the city manager of Jacks Beach. So before we get started, I just have a few brief announcements. I'm Maria Mark, by the way, if you don't know me, president of Beaches Watch, so welcome. We are a membership organization, so we are always looking for members to either renew or join for the first time or make a donation. We are also, we've also launched our announcement for the Fran Sharp scholarship for a Fletcher High School senior. So if you know of a senior, or you have a senior, and they have at least a 3.5 GPA, have them make sure they apply for our scholarship. It's $1,000, and it will be awarded during on senior night. Okay, let's see. All right. So we do video our meetings, so it will be on our YouTube channel tomorrow, Beaches Watch 2012, as well as a link on our website. So please share that with your friends and neighbors who are not able to make the meeting tonight. Again, we are a membership organization. Our memberships are $15 for individual, $20 for family, and $5 for student. It runs from January through December, and so you can either renew or join tonight with our ladies sitting at the table, or you can go to our website, beacheswatch.com. We'd like to recognize our elected officials. Very much appreciate them coming tonight, or coming to our meetings. We have Lacey Mahan, who she is Representative Keon Michael's assistant. Welcome. Hi. We have Curtis Ford, who is the mayor of the city of Atlantic Beach. We have Candace Kelly, city commissioner of Atlantic Beach. Sandy Golding, Jacks Beach. Corey Byland, mayor of Neptune Beach. Brent Rogers, Neptune Beach City Council. We have Jessica Ring, Atlantic Beach City Commissioner. And we have Greg Sutton, Jacksonville Beach City Council. Did we miss anybody to recognize? We do have a special recognition, Art Graham, who is a Jacksonville Beach resident. He has just recently been appointed to the Tennessee Valley Authority. Is that okay? All right. So all the city offices will be closed on Monday, February 16th in honor of President's Day. We are now in the middle of our 2026 legislative session, which runs through March 13th. So we ask that you please sign up to stay informed on what is currently going through our capital right now that is going to impact our cities. You can go to the website at localvoicesunited.com. I believe that's the Florida League of Cities, right? They populate that with all the latest developments and action that's going on with the bills that are going through. As I said, we have our Fran Sharp scholarship applications are now open, so please share that. Yes?
I was just going to add that if you go to that website, you can sign up to get text alerts whenever there's something important about a bill that you need to know about or need to contact a legislator about.
Okay. So if you didn't hear that, you can sign up to receive text messages, updates on if you're following certain bills. Okay. So not sure if you guys have seen, but Mayor Deegan is going to be hosting town halls again. The one at the beach will be held Thursday, February 19th from 6 to 7:30, and that will be at Fletcher High School on Seagate Avenue in Neptune Beach. You do not need to register to attend. Save the date for our Wednesday, March 4th meeting. This will be our State of the St. Johns River. Every year they release a river report that gives us indicators on the health of our river, the fishes, the crustaceans, everything that lives in and around the river. It's very informative. As you know, the St. Johns River is one of our lifelines, so it's really important that we stay up to date and as well kind of get ideas of what we can do to help preserve that. That will be here at the beaches. And so we'd just like to know how you found out about tonight's meeting. So if you saw us, we were on the front page of the Beaches Leader, their digital newspaper, if anybody saw that. No? Facebook? Newsletter? The Jacksonville Today email news? Our website? And if you talked to a friend or neighbor and they told you about it, or you told them about it. Okay. Well, that takes care of the announcements. Now we'll go to the topic of this evening, which is about defunding our cities, how proposed property tax cuts threaten local services. So we will go ahead and have Mike come up from Jacksonville Beach, and then we'll follow up with Q&A with the other city managers as well after the presentation.
Can you all hear me okay? I drew the short straw. I don't want to give this presentation, but I will give this presentation. While the title that was advertised made it sound like doom and gloom, I tried to soften it a little bit by saying it's everything you wanted to know about tax bill and city budgets, but we're afraid to ask. But really what we wanted to do was start with a very holistic discussion of taxes and whittle it down to how it impacts your local jurisdictions. Many of you have probably seen in the news all across the state that the original conversation started with, we have senior citizens who can't afford to pay their tax bill and they're losing their homes. And somewhere along the line that has now morphed into, we need to eliminate all homestead property taxes in the state of Florida. And that's a pretty big difference in terms of impact to the local community. So we're going to walk you through this a little bit and talk a little bit about tax bill, but do it from the perspective of your mortgage statement, because most people have a mortgage statement that comes in on a monthly basis. You see a dollar amount, and every so often you get that little reminder from your mortgage company that your payment's going up. And then about a year later, you get another notice that says your payment's going up, and everybody thinks that's taxes, and that's not necessarily the case. We want to talk a little bit about how your city budget is set up, because as we have found out many times when we're contacted by residents or have conversations with property owners, they think that our city budget is all taxes, and it is not, and we want to talk a little bit about that as well. Fund with funds, most people don't realize that some money you can use for certain purposes, and other money you have to use for very specific purposes, and you can't necessarily commingle. So we want to talk a little bit about that as well. And then we'll talk about what is the worst case scenario for local jurisdictions, which is the elimination of homestead property taxes across the entire state. So the first thing we want to talk about is that monthly statement that you get. And many of you have probably heard the term PITI, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. And every time you get that monthly statement, you'll see principal and interest is always a fixed dollar amount if you have a fixed interest rate loan. Those numbers don't change. The principal and interest is always the same dollar amount. But usually the taxes and insurance are bundled into a nice little line item called escrow, and you get that little notice that says your escrow is not going to be enough to cover your taxes and insurance this year, so you're going to have to pay an extra, pick the dollar amount, $50, $75, $100, $125 per month in order to make that work. It's usually a combination of both taxes and insurance, and the majority of time it's the insurance that's going up. The taxes very little because of what's called homestead, of which anybody who owns the home that they live in, if they declared for homestead, they are capped at how much the assessment can go up on an annual basis. So I'm always skeptical when someone says in a public setting, my property tax bill for my home has doubled in the last few years. If it's homesteaded, it didn't double. Maybe your insurance has gone through the roof, but it hasn't doubled because homestead caps you at how much it can increase per year. So let's talk about what a homestead property is. A homestead is going to be your primary residence, and that can be a house, a townhouse, a condo, etc. But you have to file for the homestead. It's not automatic. Everyone thinks if they buy it and it's their primary, it's done automatically for them. No, you have to fill out paperwork with your local, I believe it's the tax collector or property appraiser. But you have to fill out the paperwork, and if you don't get the homestead exemptions, and as you see on the bottom bullet, the Save Our Homes that goes along with it. It does not include second homes. So for those of you that maybe have two residences in the state of Florida, one is a primary and one is not, the other property would not be affected by any type of tax exemption that gets put in place or elimination of property taxes. That one would still see all of the same taxes that you see today. And as we said, if you qualify for a homestead exemption, not only do you get the exemption that goes along with it, but you also get a Save Our Homes cap on annual assessment increases to 3% per year or CPI, whichever is lower. So when inflation is low, your assessment can't go up by more than what the CPI is for our area, which in some cases can be as low as 1.8 or 2, as we saw several years ago. And a little bit about exemptions. This isn't really going to apply to too many properties at the beaches, but it's a tiered assessment. You just don't get $50,000 worth of assessment, worth of exemptions. You get $25,000 on the first $50,000 of assessment. Then you get another $25,000 between $50,000 and $75,000, and then anything above that you don't necessarily get an exemption on. The portability, if a homeowner moves from one primary residence to another, they can transfer up to $500,000 of the Save Our Homes benefit to their new home, so they're not starting over again. It carries with them. And then there are additional exemptions that we didn't list here, but there are a slew of them across the state related to seniors, military status, etc., that people can qualify for additional exemptions on their tax bills. And then we're going to talk a little bit about millage rate, because, again, that's important when people say, well, taxes go up. The millage rate is the amount per 1,000 of taxable value used by local governments to calculate property taxes. Under state law, local governments at the municipal level are capped at a maximum millage of 10. And as you'll see in just a minute, the three beach communities have been very respectful of that limit and very respectful of our residents with regards to where we've set our millage and where we've kept them over a number of years. The big thing here is school taxes are exempt from the homestead and Save Our Homes exemption. And with regards to elimination of homestead property tax, they're not talking about eliminating the school taxes. So we'll talk a little bit about that when the pie chart comes up, but basically your tax bill won't go to zero. You will still pay to the Duval County Public School based on their millage rate. And then again, the annual increase capped at 3%. So we talked a little bit about millage. You can see Jacksonville Beach, Neptune Beach, and Atlantic Beach all in the bottom. And we try to look at both state averages and our peer communities that we try to compare to. You'll see St. Augustine up at the top at 7.5. You'll see the statewide average at 4.8. And then you've got Jax Beach at 39947, which it has been every year since I've been here over the last 7, and it was for a couple of years before I got here. Neptune Beach at 3.3 and Atlantic Beach at 2.7, and my understanding is they just did a minor rollback this past year. And if you look at the trend of our millage rates, they've all been fairly consistent over probably a decade plus, maybe even longer. I know in Jax Beach we've always been right around that 4 number, actually going back for a few decades. So it's not like we are intentionally ramping up our millage rate to collect more tax revenue from property owners. So again, one of the things we hear from people a lot is, I look at the size of your budget, what are you doing with our tax money? Well, the first thing is, when you pay your taxes, as we said on that mortgage statement, not all those taxes go to your city. They're actually split up over multi-jurisdictions. The 3 primaries are Duval County, the city of Jacksonville. There's a millage rate specifically for them. There's the Duval County Public Schools, and then there's your local community, and a couple others. So the first one we'll take a look at is Atlantic Beach. And as we said, you see their millage rate up there is 2.7499. But if you take a look at the pie chart, you'll see that of the big three pieces of the pie, Atlantic Beach is the smallest of the three. Basically, 15.5% of the taxes that you pay when you pay your mortgage statement go to your local community. The other 85% are going to Jacksonville, Duval County School Board, the Water Management District, and Inland Navigation. So they're not even staying locally, they're going out to those other agencies. And as we said previously, what we're talking about with elimination of homestead property taxes is specifically the blue and green wedges of the pie. The school board is held harmless. That portion of the tax bill would remain if legislation goes through and the people voted in. So if you take a look, it's roughly $750 a year that the average resident with a $322,000 assessed value on their property pays to the city of Atlantic Beach. We can do the same for Neptune Beach. It's about $918 a year. And this is you guys don't need to take pictures, it's all publicly accessible. If you want, you can, but it's public record, we can make it available to you if you'd like. A $5,000 total tax bill with less than $1,000 of it going to the city of Neptune Beach, the rest going to the school board and city of Jacksonville. And in Jacksonville Beach, 3.9947, $5,200 bill with just over $1,000 going to the city of Jacksonville Beach, the rest going to the other governmental entities. So when people see the dollar value of our budgets on an annual basis, and a lot of people don't necessarily show up when we have our budget hearings, some people think that our budgets are reflective of everything they pay for taxes, and it's not. The tax portion of our budget is actually very small in comparison to the remainder of the budget itself. So we wanted to talk a little bit about that. Annual budget for each of the communities actually includes both capital projects and annual operating expenses. And it's for the entire fiscal year, and it's across all city operations, not just any one operation. It usually includes the 5-year capital improvement program, which is a listing of projects that you're doing not just in this year, but for the next 4 to 5 years out as a roadmap to show you where major expenditures are going to take place in your infrastructure. And the last is that the fiscal year is October 1 through September 30. We do not run on a calendar year like the rest of the country with January 1st. Ours starts October 1. So on October 1, we typically have a fiscal New Year party. I know. Municipal humor and fun. So the annual budget is more than just property taxes. We're actually going to start with the bottom one first, D. When property taxes come in, they usually go into an unrestricted fund that's called the general fund. The reason it's called the general fund is because there's multiple revenue streams that come into it, but more importantly, from a state regulatory perspective, you can use that money for anything that you want. You can use it to pay for salaries, you can use it to buy a pump, you can use it to buy a police vehicle, you can use it to pave a road, you can use it for anything you want. Then we have restricted funds and enterprise funds. Enterprise funds are typically accounts that pay for themselves, like a water department. The revenue that comes in from the water department pays to continue to perpetuate the water department going forward into the future. And then restricted funds are where the state has come in and said the money that's coming in from this particular revenue stream or going into a certain pot has to be used for certain things. You can't just broad brush and put it where you want it. So the reason that this is important is because, as you'll see a little bit later, when we start talking about budget gaps that are created, there's not necessarily the ability at the local government to fill those gaps because the gap that we're talking about is created in the unrestricted fund. So you can't take from a restricted fund and put money into the unrestricted fund if it's restricted from being done. So a little bit about our total budgets versus our general fund. So we've now talked about this one fund, the unrestricted general fund, and that's where the property tax dollars go into. For the city of Atlantic Beach, they have a total budget of $57.6 million, of which $21 million is general fund. And of that $21 million, only a portion of that is property taxes, which we'll show in a second. The same thing with Neptune Beach, just under $28 million for their budget, with 11,700,000 being general fund. In Jax Beach, our budget is 248 million, with 33 million of it being general fund. And a lot of you might be saying, 248 million? Why is that so much different than the other two? Beaches Energy Services. Beaches Energy Services provides electric service to Neptune Beach, Jacksonville Beach, and northern portions of St. Johns County to include Ponte Vedra and Palm Valley. Their budget alone, which is an enterprise fund, is about $100 million. So if you remove Beaches Energy from the equation, that takes our budget down to about $140 million or so, which puts it a lot closer to the other two. But again, our general fund is a much smaller percentage because of those enterprise funds associated with Beaches Energy. So now let's talk about how much of that general fund money is actually ad valorem taxes. And notice that is a pot of both homestead and non-homestead. For Atlantic Beach, about 40% is ad valorem taxes that make up their general fund. The rest are all miscellaneous revenues that you see on the left-hand side of the screen. In terms of where they spend their money, you'll see that the largest is just about 40% for public safety, and another 30% for general government, public works, recreation, transfers out, and human services. So all of the money that's coming into the general fund is being used for operations to include public safety, public works, parks and recreation, and general government functions. The same thing can be said about Neptune Beach. Just about 43% of their general fund is made up of property taxes, both homestead and non-homestead. You'll see all their other miscellaneous categories on the side. Those are the codings that they use for the different funds. You'll see on the other side again, what's the number one expense being paid for out of this account? Police department. But they've got a lot of the same: public works, community development, parks and sustainability. Those are all daily functions that are needed to help your local government run. We were able to get a graphic for Neptune Beach just to show you that the police department, again, is almost about half the pie for expenditure, and the rest are all much smaller slivers. For Jacksonville Beach, we don't have a table. We stuck with a pie chart because ours was the basis that we were working off of. But you'll see ad valorem taxes are about 57% of the revenues coming into our general fund, and you'll see some other miscellaneous. And then for our expenditures, we've got a little over 50%, about 52% that goes to public safety between police and fire expenses. The rest pay for our parks and recreation, public works, planning and development, and other non-departmental operations within our organization. So let's talk about what's being discussed at the state level. The House actually looked at passing through joint resolution about 7 different bills for consideration. And they ranged from eliminating all homestead property taxes to doing some additional exemptions and everything in between. The one that's actually gotten attention, is actually going through committees at this point in time, is kind of that worst case scenario. It's elimination of all homestead property taxes over a 10-year window by adding an additional $100,000 of homestead exemption each year for 10 years, and at the 10th year, whatever's left goes away. The reason that the 10 years is a little bit of a fallacy is because most people who have homestead properties, if you look at your assessment, if you remember from one of those previous screens, we showed you that the average is $322,000 of assessed value. So someone who lives in, say, a $600,000 home or a $700,000 home, they're paying on $322,000 of assessed value, which means 100% of the tax revenue from that property won't be gone in 10 years, it'll be gone between 3 and 4. And so for a majority of properties that we have at the beaches, most of that revenue will be lost in the first 3 to 4 years of that implementation, not necessarily 10. The 10 will come into play when you start to talk about multi-million-dollar properties that are paying on an assessment over $1 million a year. One of the notes that's been placed in the legislation is that public safety expenditures are to be held harmless from any funding restrictions, which means if we start talking about the pie chart and a loss of revenue, a portion of the pie chart is being dictated by the state as not being touched. You are not allowed to touch it. You can't reduce expenditures associated with it. And right now they're proposing, I believe it's a minimum 2 or 3 year window that you cannot reduce those expenses. So as an example, if we said, well, maybe we want to reduce what we're paying for police services, you can't. You will be locked into paying what you're paying today for the next 3 years at a minimum. The other, as we've said, is that the school ad valorem taxes are held harmless from any of the exemptions we're talking about. So now we start talking about the ad valorem taxes and the split of homestead versus non-homestead for those. So of the $8.5 million that Atlantic Beach collects, 4.6 of it is homestead and 3.9 is non-homestead. So now we're starting to talk about the actual dollar impact to each community. For Atlantic Beach, if all homestead property goes away, they're looking at losing $4.6 million of revenue. For Neptune Beach, we're talking $2.6 million, 2.5. And for Jax Beach, we have two different numbers here because we have 2 CRA districts, which I don't want to get into the complexities of explaining how that works. But the long and short of it is that within our regular budget, not our CRA budget, we'd be looking at losing about $6.9 million of revenue. So these are some pretty big numbers. And more importantly, if you take a look at it from this perspective, these are the losses in comparison to the percentage of the general fund revenue. So for Atlantic Beach, we're all three about the same. We're all going to lose somewhere between 21 to 22% of our general fund revenue if homestead property taxes go away. So now here's where the state's gotten a little squirrely, because a lot of people have asked at the House and the Senate side, it's great that we're talking about eliminating property taxes, but we recognize local governments are going to have a hole. How do we fill that hole? Because we can't necessarily take from restricted funds and move it into the general fund. And the message that they're hearing in Tallahassee is, we'll figure that part out later. Don't worry about it. Let's just get this on the ballot first. And if it passes, we'll figure out how to implement it. That doesn't give me a warm, fuzzy feeling. I'm not sure it gives a lot of other city managers or CFOs around the state a warm, fuzzy feeling either. So there's always a couple of options that local government has. The first one in this case is you can raise millage rates to offset the loss. When we raise millage rates, it's going to affect all of those non-homesteaded properties. At that point, what we've effectively put in place is a tax shift. All we have done is taken the tax burden and shifted it from people who own homes to people who own second homes, investment properties, commercial or industrial properties. And that's not necessarily what you want to do either. The second option is you can reduce services to compensate for the loss of revenue, which then poses other questions. So what you see on this chart here is, here's what the millage increase would need to be in order to offset the loss of revenue. For Atlantic Beach, they'd have to bump up their millage by about 1.5 mils, 3.7 for Neptune Beach, and about 2.6 for the city of Jacksonville Beach. On top of the mills, the millage rates that we already have established, this would be in addition to. The other option is to try to make cuts. So for Atlantic Beach, they've got to look at their chart and say, we can't touch the public safety line item. Where does the other 21% come from? And that's going to be a big policy decision when you start talking about meeting with your elected officials to say, do you want to take it out of public works? Do you want to take it out of recreation and closed parks? Do you want to do some mix and match, maybe raise the millage a little bit and cut some services a little bit? But until the state says, here's the plan for implementation to make sure that governments are still able to pay for the services that residents want, this is the situation we will be in if the implementation ends up falling flat. For Neptune Beach, it's the same thing. They've got to figure out where to get about 22% out of the other half of the pie. And I don't envy them, the same situation, Public Works, 17%, Community Development, Clerk's Office, Ocean Rescue, Animal Control. Those would all be services that are up for chopping, so to speak. And then it's the same thing in Jack's Beach. We've got 52% of our pie that can't be touched, so that 20.8% needs to come off of the right half somewhere. And not exactly sure where that would come from. Now, what makes this all worse is the fact that this is only one piece of legislation. The state is also looking at other pieces of legislation which will potentially negatively impact our general funds as well. The first is elimination of business tax receipts. For the city of Jacksonville Beach, that's about $300,000 to $350,000 a year. They're talking about just eliminating them altogether. That's revenue from the general fund that would go away, and we'd have to figure out how to close that gap as well. The second is restriction or elimination of utility transfer. You saw in some of these other charts transfers. You are allowed to transfer from your utility operations into the general fund, but they're looking at either putting a cap on it or reducing it from what you're currently allowed to do at the state level. The third one, and this is one that's a little squishier, it's called increasing sovereign immunity limits. Many people don't know, but local government is protected by a clause in state statute called sovereign immunity. Anytime there is legal action against the city, we are capped at $200,000 per individual per event, or $300,000 in the aggregate. So think about a city vehicle getting in a car accident. These are the worst case scenarios of what we pay out. There are some exceptions that involve going to the state and filing a special bill to go above these limits, but it's a very arduous process, and it has to be something that's very gross and negligent on the municipality's part. But they're talking about raising those limits of sovereign immunity, which means as we deal with lawsuits, we might have to have higher payouts. And some of those payouts are going to come from the general fund, and the insurance premiums that we pay, a portion comes out of the general fund as well. So while we're at $300,000 today, which is line A, there are two bills being proposed. One is to go to $300,000 and $450,000 from the Senate side. The other on the House side is to go to $500,000 and $1 million. So you can imagine all those trip and falls on sidewalks and fender benders with cars. Instead of settling for $50,000, people will want to start settling for $200,000, $300,000, or $400,000. So those may also place strain on us in the general fund as well. That's all we've got. I'm sure there's probably a lot of questions. Went about 35 minutes, and I'm sure Ricky and Kevin would be more than happy to answer any questions that you've got.
That's right, you didn't have enough time. Thank you. Thank you for trying to navigate us through all the complexities that's going on. We will have the Q&A right now, so we just have a couple of house rules. If you would just raise your hand and wait for the microphone, the roaming microphone to come to you. And please keep your questions succinct. Please do not give us any kind of dissertation before you ask the question, to make sure we get everyone's questions in for this evening. And gentlemen, if you'll take this mic, if you want to just stand here. So, Mike, you still have to join me. You still have to answer questions. We're not letting you off that easy. Okay, questions, please raise your hand.
Good evening, thank you. What's the impact of this legislation on the percentage that goes to Duval County and the city of Jacksonville?
Can you talk?
Excuse me, how's this?
There, that's better.
Did
The
you
mic.
work? Okay. What's the perceived changes to the percentage of funds that go to Duval County and the city of Jacksonville in your overall distribution?
This Jacksonville will be affected the same way the beaches are. So every other municipality in the state. And Jacksonville will be affected just like what you saw on this chart right here. All municipalities in the state will be affected equally like this. So you're talking about loss of service, and they'll lose their homestead taxes too. So they're in the same situation if that goes into effect. They can't touch rescue, fire, and police, but everything else will be up for grabs.
But would the percentage of the taxes we pay locally be looked at and shifted based on that change?
Yes,
We're going to pull up the pie chart.
yeah.
Whatever that's worth.
Yeah, so basically, yes, the 42% of homesteaded taxes that we send that way, they're not going to be able to collect, just like we are. And,
Speak into the mic, please.
yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, so as you see, the 42.9% that we send to the city of Jacksonville from homestead taxes, they can't receive homestead either. So we can't keep it, they can't keep it. So does that answer your question, sir?
If that goes, I guess when it goes into a void like that, what we as a beach community pay towards Jacksonville as part of our dollars,
Okay.
is that going to be redistributed?
Yeah, please. Yeah, so just to walk you through, again, this is the Neptune Beach bill, but just to show you real quick, right now, on a $322,000 assessed home, the bill's about $5,000 with these breakdowns. Basically, the only number that will stay on there is Duval County School Board. Neptune will not collect their $918. Jacksonville will not collect their $2,156. And the Water Management District and Inland Navigation, it's my understanding those would go away as well. Those are not protected by exemptions. It's okay, Doug. You're right there with us. But basically, this tax bill of $5,000 would drop down to about $1,900. So this person's going to say, great, I'm saving $3,000 a year in taxes. And that's revenue that's not going to Jacksonville or Neptune Beach or to the Water Management District. So yeah, basically Jacksonville's going to lose a big chunk of money because their millage rate's at 7.9. So that's revenue they're not getting from every homestead property in all of Duval County. So that 18 cents. And so we keep 18 cents at the beaches. We keep 18.6%.
Speak into the mic.
We keep 18 cents out of every dollar that goes to Duval and the homestead taxes. So we won't be able to keep that money, and they won't be able to receive that money. That's basically what it comes down to. And one more thing real quick. If you live in a city and you have a house and this goes into effect, you're living in the city and you're not really, what are you contributing to the running of the city if you're not paying any homestead taxes? Nothing, which is good for your pocket up front, but, and we have to, let's say we have to hit the commercial and non-homesteaded real hard. Well, everywhere you go, everything's going to go up, I guarantee you. And then obviously there's going to be some city services lost, some personnel laid off. So when your road's crumbling, the beach is not getting cleaned every day, your parks are looking terrible, where's that money going to come from? So I don't know of any other places we can squeeze other than we would have to cut personnel, we would have to cut services. And that's not just us. We count on Jacksonville for a lot of services and a lot of personnel. Same thing. They'll probably lose half of their budget. And they can't touch law enforcement or fire or rescue, but that's going to be the same situation. When we go to do something in Jacksonville, are they cutting people? Are they cutting personnel? Are they cutting services? How are they going to make it? So, and that would be anywhere in the state. This is not just local. Anywhere in the state.
I don't care who answers this, but originally this was proposed to save elderly people from losing their homes with taxes. What's the point now? Other than to take money away from the cities and give it to the state.
That's not even getting.
Yeah, it's.
Yeah. Actually, this is not giving the money to the state, this is just not collecting it. The state does not collect any property taxes. Property taxes are all collected at the local level, from your municipalities and from your county. So when the governor says, I want to do this, it's great for him because he's not affecting the state budget at all. It's all affected at the local level. There are also areas of the state, maybe you've heard the term before, fiscally constrained. There are fiscally constrained counties, there are fiscally constrained cities. Those are the ones that are in the central portion of the state. They have low populations, they have low economic development, their houses are valued very low. They've all hit their municipal cap of 10 mils and they still don't get enough money to pay for basic public safety services like police and fire. The state already subsidizes some of those communities, both counties and cities. The governor has said, if this goes through, we will make sure that those fiscally constrained cities and counties are made whole. But he's made no reference to anybody else who does not have that qualification or that moniker associated with their community.
So I think her question was, the marketing idea was save the old people's house.
Yeah.
And so now is the marketing idea, we're going to save all of you property tax, you're going to have more money in your pocket. Is that how they're, quote, selling it? You're welcome.
Yes, actually, yes.
All of the above. Yes. Got it.
Thank you for presenting this, and it's slightly unfair of us, actually very unfair for us to ask you questions for a policy that you didn't invent, and I think this has really helped to educate us, and I know I'll try to reach out to say, what are you doing? So, sorry, you said don't give a prelude. My question is, if this does come to pass, I'm a property owner in Neptune Beach, my primary residence, my parents live in my house in Neptune Beach. The worst case scenario, are you, at least with Neptune and Atlantic Beach, would they look to consolidate? I have a finance background and it just seems like if you have to cost cut that. Didn't say it.
Who wants to take that one?
I don't know, just looking at it as is, if they consolidated, you still have the problem.
I understand, but it's less that.
But, so I don't know any other way out of that problem by consolidating, other than, our elected officials would have to make some very, very, very difficult decisions on, what to cut. So I think you'd still be in the exact same situation, even if all three beaches, consolidated in Ocean County.
Hello. Is the 9318 in that example, is that sort of the premium that we pay to live out here at the beach versus if we lived off of, say, San Pablo Road? For any of the beaches communities?
There's an interlocal agreement between the city of Jacksonville and the 4 independent municipalities, Baldwin and the 3 beach communities. If you live on the other side of the Intercoastal Waterway, the 7.9 mils that you see for city of Jacksonville is actually higher by about 3.2 mils, I believe, by interlocal agreement. So that 3.2 differential was meant to be the cost for municipal services. So basically, if you go to the other side of the Intercoastal, it'll be about the same, but not quite the same of each of the 3 beach communities.
It's worth it if it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Water management person, you want to talk?
Well, it's great to see
Tell
you.
them who you are.
I'm Doug Conkey. I am the intergovernmental coordinator for the Water Management District. I live in Clay County, which is a heavily homesteaded community. So Mike, I want to thank you for raining on my water management. I thought things were looking good until you said, nope, gone. But talking to a new city manager over in Clay that has just gotten here from Iowa, and we were talking, and he said, if you wanted to minimize government, how would you do it? You would defund it. So he described the impacts. So as you've described it, you take away, and there's 411 cities in the state, each one's going to be a little bit different. And then you talk good chunk of your cash is protected by public safety stuff. At what point in time will certain cities start to go, you got to join another city, or ultimately some of your services are already provided by the county? You say, we're done, county, you have the keys to the car, we're unincorporating, and you'll have a bunch of cities that go away off the map. Do you foresee something like that? I don't know what Florida League of Cities is saying, but this is going to push some communities to the edge. That's just,
You're absolutely right.
Yeah, ours will be the ones on the edge, on 3 of ours.
Yeah. If you remember the chart on millage, each of the 3 beach communities still have a lot of room under the millage cap of 10. But you take a community like St. Augustine that's already at 7.5. If to close the gap they needed to raise by 3.5 or 4 mils, they can't. They're capped at 10. So they will have a budget deficit if whatever the calculation is for them. If they have a deficit, then they're going to have to make cuts. And those are services they will not be able to provide. Ultimately, the decision to remain incorporated versus de-incorporating and going back into the county is a community by community decision. And it really comes down to what the values of those residents are.
Going back to that one question back there and your explanation, so we're saving on property tax. We have to find money somewhere to mend that hole in the sock, and wouldn't that result in the raise of sales tax? And that way, we pay it, we are not saving anything, we're paying it.
But that certainly will be on the table, sales tax, the consideration of raising it, but we won't make that at the local level, will we? That'll be at the state level.
Would also like to point out that when this proposal was first floated by the governor's office, there's 3 branches of government. There's the governor, there's the Senate, and there's the House of Representatives. And even though they're all controlled by the same party, they don't all necessarily get along. So when this was first floated for property tax, one of the other 2 branches said, why don't we decrease the sales tax and give every Floridian a tax break? Lowering it to, by 25 cents, or by 0.25 or 0.5. That didn't go over well with the governor's office.
And visitors to the state.
And visitors to the state as well, which obviously they pay a large portion of sales tax here for tourism.
Here at the beaches, we have a lot of rental properties also, and there's been a lot of talk about trying to have more affordable housing. Well, if you're a landlord and your tax bill goes up exponentially, the rents are going to have to go up exponentially, and it's going to make it even more unaffordable, and it's also going to decrease the incentive to have rental properties, because who wants to pay an exorbitant tax and be the scapegoat?
Indeed, this is counterintuitive to the affordable housing stance and endeavor that's also being going on in Tallahassee. You're right.
A lot of talk about affordability, and the housing impact of increased taxes is depreciation of property values. So when you shift that burden, as was brought up, to investment property, it will dramatically affect the affordability of your community. I'd like to take exception to the state controlling sales taxes. There is in many states, the local option sales tax available to them, and I think that will become imperative, and communities are going to have to raise the revenue and not just shift it into investment properties or commercial properties. Do you agree with that?
That indeed could be done at the county level, you're right.
Hi, thanks for doing this. I still can't
can't wrap my head around why people think this is a good idea. So I'm struggling with that. I understand, you know, lowering people's taxes, and I understand limited government and reducing government, but it's a short-term fix. Anyways, I'm still wrapping my head. I have two questions. One is, we all are fairly dependent on grants. And when I look at this pie, we're not going to have the ability to match grants. And that's going to be another loss, right? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. And then my other question is, I guess, as citizens, can we say this is not a good idea? What's the best way? Besides just kind of writing and calling, and it seems like we need to do an absolute.
Yes, all of that, please. And yes, we've had at City Hall and Atlantic Beach, we've had the discussion about matching grants and how that would be impacted. And yes, please, on this and every other topic, please engage your elected officials at every level.
Quick question. If any of this were to pass by the legislature, would any of it have to go to the voters for approval statewide?
Yes.
Yes.
If that's the case, would it have to meet the 60% plus threshold?
Yes.
Very important point for all of us to know.
Back here.
I'm sorry. If the legislature were to pass this, it has to go to the voters for the entire state to approve it, and there would have to be 60% would have to pass it plus one.
But it will be sold as saving the taxpayer money, and yeah, you know.
This lady asked how we could
Yeah.
do something about it. That's the way.
So curious, there's got to be other city managers that are just, sorry, I thought I was talking. I feel your pain. There must be other city managers that are concerned about this as well. So has the state gone to the city managers and they've said, okay, this is what we're thinking about, and what are your opinions?
No.
Our cities are all members of the Florida League of Cities, and yes, a big chunk of what Florida League does for cities is advocacy with the legislature. They're spending a lot of time on our behalves directly expressing our points of view.
Talk about going to Tallahassee. Talk about going to Tallahassee. Yeah.
Yeah, just this last week was legislative action days for the Florida League of Cities. And many of the elected officials that are in the room here today went to Tallahassee with contingents across the entire state to meet with their individual local representatives and senators. In our case, we met with Rep. Michael. We also met with Senator Clay Yarborough, and we expressed our concern with the proposed legislation on property taxes. It's interesting to note that while there is a bill moving through on the House side, there's no companion legislation right now on the Senate side. They actually have to have matching bills in order for it to move forward to the governor's desk for signature through the end of committee process. And right now, it does not look like the House and Senate are on the same page. So that's actually a good thing. But the other thing I wanted to mention, because you mentioned sales tax as a means of revenue. One of the things I would point out is that if it's the statewide sales tax, which, you know, when they do, if it were to pass and they do implementation, there's every indication that they may control it at the state level. That means the state has total control over the revenues coming to local jurisdictions. And this past year, you know, we talked about the general fund and the fact that there's multiple streams of revenue that come into it. One of them is a state revenue share. I forgot to ask the two of you, but I know in our case, for all of fiscal year 2025, we had 8% of our revenue withheld by the state because the state said we're not sure what's going to happen with the economy and we need to make sure our coffers are full before we give full funding to the local jurisdictions. We're now 4 months into fiscal year 2026. They've still not released any of the money from 2025 of that 8% that they withheld from us. Just putting that out there.
I have a question. jump in before the audience. So you brought up the interlocal agreement earlier, and that was not brought up as far as part of your presentation, but do you guys have any idea as far as if this happens, how it would affect the interlocal agreement that the Beaches has with the City of Jacksonville, as far as services? Because they're supposed to give us services or us paying them, and if their revenue stream is going to be basically eliminated under this scenario, what's going to happen to the services that the Beaches are supposed to be getting from the city?
I'm going to turn it over to one of the others that have been having these conversations.
My opinion is that whatever part of that interlocal agreement is generated by homestead taxes, we're going to lose. And what are we going to do? You know, take them to court? They don't have it anymore. They lost them just like we did. And I can't remember exactly. I remember a lot of the things that we were discussing with COJ. There are a few of them that are more than likely generated from homestead taxes. So yes, I think that would be a major concern.
Kevin, do you want to add, or Mayor? Mayor Ford?
So, Curtis Ford, Mayor of Atlantic Beach. You're the guru, so this is to you. Did I read somewhere yesterday that there was a legislative proposal separate from this that would actually take the Save Our Homes tax cap of 3% per year on, I believe that's on assessed value, and make it 3% over 3 years? Okay, so clarify for us what that means, okay, because that's a nice way of giving benefit to homestead properties without completely cratering the tax system, right?
Sure. So the bill that Mayor Ford is referencing is the fact that that 3% per year increase, it's either 3% or CPI, whichever is less. There's a bill being proposed that says it wouldn't go up by more than 3% once every 3 years. If that were to go through on its own, it becomes an extra benefit to homesteaded property owners. If, however, the elimination of homestead property tax with $100,000 per year for 10 years goes through, it supersedes that one, because the way that legislation is written, the day that it goes into effect, everybody's assessment is frozen in time. And then the 100,000 additional exemptions start adding up year over year. So if your property is assessed at 322, it'll be 322, the next year it will be 222, the next year it will be 122, the next year it will be 22, and the year after that it's gone. So it would be superseded if this were to pass. If that passes and this one does not, then that would just be an added benefit for homesteaded properties of having an even slower growth in the assessed value.
Question?
Good evening, Jim Wheatley. I was going to have two questions. Number one, what the cities do, and I think you do have a good question committee I'm hearing about. Secondly, what can we do? State representatives, can we get them down here and let them know just how we feel? This is a fiasco, we all know that. I have a second property in Florida, and I'm not going to pay for the tax for that one, I already know that. And the services are going to have to be diminished. I mean, it does nobody any good. Let's get those folks down here. Let's tell them how we feel.
So kind of follow up on you said you had a conversation with Representative Michael and Yarborough. What was their feedback to you or their opinion? You said you had a meeting or you?
Yeah, okay. I think I'd rather have one of our elected officials speak to that. Actually, yes, we do have a representative for Michael here, so why don't we ask her?
Put her on the spot.
Hi everybody, again my name is Lacey Mohan. I am her district aide, and so as far as questions about feedback, what you can do, I understand right now you feel like you're just speaking into the void, and you are welcome to contact our office, and Representative Michael, of course, is in Tallahassee, but she has called me right before this meeting, and this is an incredibly important issue to her, and that's the reason I'm here, so that you are all heard. And so with that being said, please come to me after. You can get my business card. You can come by our district office, call, email, and I look forward to speaking with the officials with the cities so that we can have a better idea of what ultimately some of the effects will be to our communities. However, I can tell you right now we are waiting to hear more concrete direction from the House, the Senate leadership, and above all, the governor's office. You summed it up quite well in that we're looking at a lot of bills. The direction is quite unclear. However, above all, this is very important. And so with that being said, one of the things that you can do is come to me, and I will talk with the representative, and she works closely with Senator Yarborough. And so, this is why I'm here. But please, you're welcome to come up to me after.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry that I didn't answer anything directly, but
What's the current stance?
her current stance, well, right now there are certain bills that are coming through, but there are bills that don't have companion bills. There are bills that are addressing particular aspects of it, but at this point there's no particular package that encompasses these, and I speculate to say that may be a possibility. However, at this point, there's no clear indication. These have gone through committees. They're waiting to reach the floor, but she wants to know how everyone feels here, and well, that's something I certainly will take to let her know, but she wants to know more information and what the substantive language is of the bill before, I can give you a definitive decision. And I can't speak on her behalf, but I can say that everything that you guys are sharing with me tonight matters, and this is part of it.
We'll be happy to send her the PowerPoint too.
Yeah, please.
So she can actually see the real numbers
Yes.
as opposed to the esoteric conversation that.
Yes, please send that to me as well.
Thank you.
I would just add, this is Sandy Golding, City of Jacksonville Beach, and I was with Mike and our mayor and all the rest of our city council when we went to Tallahassee. I know that the Neptune Beach mayor was there, and there was Jessica from Atlantic Beach was there. We had meetings with Rep. Michael and with Senator Yarborough, but Jax Beach last fall had a meeting with both of them, and we gave them some of this presentation at that time. And I will say that they both understood the gravity of our concerns because we gave them those numbers. When we were in Tallahassee, they were still saying, yes, we understand. The good thing about Senator Yarborough is that he served on the Jacksonville City Council. So he has served in municipal government. He understands the impact that this would have to Jacksonville and to our communities. So he gets it. The Senate is being really quiet right now. The House is where I'm most concerned because honestly, we're hearing good things from Rep. Michael, but when I watch the committee meetings, the things I'm hearing from some of the other reps that are from other areas, they think that we are flush with cash and that we have, we don't need this money and that the money needs to go away and that we have been irresponsible. And I think that we've been able to show with the presentation and all these numbers that we have been responsible and we are not, we're not just frivolously spending money. I will say, and I don't think anybody here that I've ever spoken with has ever told me that they want less services. Everybody that's ever come to me always says, I want more services, but we're not going to be able to do more if we have less. Ultimately, I think we still need to be reaching out to our legislators, and I definitely think everyone needs to talk to Lacey. My biggest concern, though, is the legislators that I think are the biggest concern are not ours. And and they don't tend to listen to anyone that's not in their district. That's the challenge.
But the good news that Mike gave us was the Senate is not bringing forth anything. And the other thing might be that there's a lame duck governor, just saying.
And so it won't make it to the ballot, right? Fingers crossed.
I just won't be lengthy, but please, thank you so much for having me here. This is incredibly informative. It's really important. And just the amount of knowledge that you all have, I get it, incredibly vast. But I understand not everybody has the time to go to Tallahassee. We all have jobs. So our office is 5 minutes away. You're welcome to come and stop by anytime, and I'll be there.
Tell everybody where it is.
We are on 421, and I have a business card, 421 3rd Street North. There's that strip center where there's a chiropractor and next to Rita's. But yes, ma'am. So yes, ma'am. I will be there all the time. The legislative aide Destiny, if anybody has spoken with her, she's over there in Tallahassee with the representative, and of course Representative Michael is over there as well. And of course there raises the question of whether or not they will be there a bit longer for special session. That's a separate issue. No need to bring that up, but yes, I understand not everyone can come to Tallahassee, but I'm here, our door's always open, and thank you very much. I very much understand this is a great concern, so again, I'm new to her office, but I've been in the legislative process for about 15 years now, so anything that I can do to help, I'm here.
Thank you. Thank you, Lacey, and thank you for sharing that information. Yeah, her office, you should see the marquee on 3rd Street, so it's right there. We're going to wrap things up. Oh, Sarah. All right, Sarah.
Sorry.
Sarah will wrap it up.
Okay. 2 questions. One, Mike, is this a problem of like one size fits all, and that we have to maybe consider moving the goalposts? Like you said, I'm not sure I understand the 10 cap. Like, can we change that? I mean, if there's areas that are losing their shirt, et cetera, I mean, can we find compromise there, like work the problem rather than kind of slash everything? And then, oh, I forgot my second one. I was better. Any sense of how the market will respond? I mean, will insurance go up? You know, what are we seeing?
Those are the unintended consequences.
So I'll tackle the first part first, the second part second. The first part of, where is there compromise? I don't know that we're basically be negotiating against ourselves, which is never a position you want to be in, because there is no proposed implementation language. It's eliminate the funds and we'll work out the details later. So even if we said, let us go up higher on millage, who wants to raise their millage to more than 10 for a municipality? I don't want to raise it more than the 39947 we're already at. So the question becomes, well, what revenues will the state allow us to charge to fill in that gap? And that needs to be done either legislatively, or if it's going to be through changes to state constitution, then it needs to be through a vote of the people again. So I don't know that there's really a lot of compromising that can take place at this point in time. The second question that you had, can you say it?
The market.
Oh, the market. One of the things I wanted to point out is not every city is in exactly the same financial position. Jacksonville Beach, I'm going to knock on the wall, because I'm sure there's some wood in there somewhere. We are a debt-free community. We have no outstanding general debt. We retired it back in, I think, 2020 or 2021. There are other communities that have borrowed. They have bonded to pay for new city halls or major infrastructure. They've bonded against their general fund revenues. Now you're talking about the revenue stream getting chopped by potentially 20% or more in those communities. They still have bond obligations they have to pay. So in those instances, they may end up having to cut even more services than communities like us because they have borrowed so much money. So it's going to be difficult. Some of those communities may have their bond rating affected if they're not able to commit to paying everything that they have to pay, and they're going to have to maybe make deeper cuts than others. Hope that helps.
Thank you. I think City Manager Pike will say something, and then we're going to wrap things up.
If you would consider this, if you are your average voter watching TV and the advertisements start coming out to get rid of property taxes, good. Hey, that $5,000 I'm paying, which of course is not correct, but you know, if I vote, we can get rid of that. I mean, that's going to be very tempting, very tempting. And you know, is this is this something to make the local governments weaker and the state stronger? I don't know, but I do want to thank Mike. Kevin and I want to thank Mike. Great job. Thank you so much for the help. Kevin and I, we did help a little bit, but he's the mastermind behind it. And I want to say, as my 3 years as city manager, I've been to the godfather of city managers numerous times. Brady's going to quit answering the phone go to him for counsel and advice, and he's been great. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation. Just a reminder, this is being videotaped, so please share the link with your neighbors and friends, and please make sure they do their part as well, contacting our local representatives, and just staying abreast of the situation. And I have one more request, and that is for those who are able, if you could help us stack the chairs, we will be out of here very quickly. Thank you again.